What's up, y'all? This is Scott with Paddle to Florida Keys. Little post EC 300 rundown. What didn't work? Um, First of all, the forecast was for breeze to fill in, breeze to be pretty good on Saturday, and then dying out Saturday night, picking up Sunday about noon. And then Wednesday was also supposed to be a pretty breezy day, so we knew we had those days we had to work around. Our goal, my goal was to get across Charlotte Harbor before the breeze filled in on Sunday, which meant that I had to get down past checkpoint 1 Saturday, camp somewhere, and get up real early. I ended up camping on Dog Island, and I got up real early Sunday morning, and then crossed the upper part of Charlotte Harbor down to Pine Island without much waves. After that, the wind filled in. At that point, I joined up with Veterans Voyage, Josh Collins. He and I were going back and forth with each other last year and then this year as well. Somewhere around the third day or so, we decided we were paddling together, so we just decided to stick together. But at this point, on the second day, we just happened to run into each other again. So we decided to go down the eastern side of Pine Island, hoping that when the wind came in from the west, it would be a little more protected. I don't know if that was the case or not, but it did get pretty windy coming down through Pine Island. Charlotte Harbor is always a challenge for the race. The start was tough. We had the upwind all the way across Tampa Bay, and then all the way down Sarasota Bay as well was upwind, but not terrible. 15, lumpy, very lumpy. There's a lot of boat wakes and stuff. But we made our goal. We got into I got into checkpoint 1 about I think I don't know, around 11 o'clock, midnight, something like that. We had some fog at the end. If the wind definitely kept true to the forecast, it died out. Ghosted into checkpoint 1, then paddled out of checkpoint 1 about another 8 miles down to Dog Island, which is just the north end of Charlotte Harbor. So I talked about Charlotte Harbor going across Pine Island and down through there, and that was coming out of there was pretty rough. The first day my mileage was about, I think, 70 miles. Second day mileage was only about 40 miles. So we come out of Charlotte Harbor, made the turn to go into Estero Bay, and there's an open water section there that was pretty rugged. Josh thought he was going to go on the outside, so he tried that for a little bit, and I thought that was the last I was going to see of him for the race. But turns out he decided to duck back into Estero as well, and so we hooked back up later on that night, and then for the rest of the race we stayed together. That worked out really, really awesome. Having somebody to paddle with, I think, especially on paddle boards, because you're so exposed, and the wind was so windy in places that when you stop to look at the GPS, you get blown off course just when you're looking. So you had to maintain your course a little bit, and so that was Charlotte Harbor, and then we get on down to we get up the next morning at Estero. We stayed at Bowtie Island, and we get up the next morning. We go down to we decided to go to Wiggins Pass because it looked like it was going to be pretty windy on the outside going to Naples, and we wanted to take as much inside as possible. So it's probably an extra mile or two to go to Wiggins, but you do stay out of the ocean for that much longer. And then you come out of Wiggins Pass, you get about 12 and a half miles to Gordon Pass, which is down by Naples. And so that was pretty good. We managed to take a little break for a couple hours at the beach on Wiggins Pass and let the tide go out. That's the other thing we found was you gotta let the tides and the winds and the weather kind of regulate how long you paddle or how hard you paddle. When I calculated it, it looked like if we waited for 2 hours at Wiggins while the tide finished coming in, we would catch the outgoing tide there. And then that turned out to be great because with the incoming wind and the outgoing tide going down through Naples, we're able to not have to get beat up against shore. We were able to stay outside and paddle relatively easily. I mean, as easy as you can in EC. But we made that crossing in pretty good time. Come into Gordon Pass, it's super flat. There's lots of camping down through there if you need to stop again, but that's usually too soon for us. So we paddle on through Naples down to Marco on the inside. Now when you get to Marco, you can either go outside or inside. It's a mile further to go outside, but if it's rough, or, you know, to cut tied against you, then you want to go on the outside anyway. But because we had timed our thing properly, we rode the tide in on Gordon Pass, and then when we got to Marco, the tide was still coming in, and so we rode the tide in all the way to Goodland, where we took a nap, and then we rode the tide going out Goodland out to the ocean. You have to be on the ocean again for about 12.5 miles. Once you get to Indian Key Pass, then you want to be on the incoming tide for that. So we were able to maximize all that. Just because we did that 2-hour stop way back at Wiggins Pass, we were able to get in sync with the tides all the way through the rest of the race for the most part. We only had to paddle against one more tide, I believe. So that was crucial for our success. So we paddled into Wiggins. We paddled out of Indian Key Pass. We paddled into Indian Key Pass, then we paddled into the Everglades. We were riding the rising tide all the way up into Crooked Creek. Once we got to Crooked Creek, then the tide was kind of ebbing at that point. We paddled through the upper part of the Everglades there on a downwind. So this is Tuesday now. The wind came in out of the north. It blew us really hard, but we were on a downwind situation, so that was good. And there's lots of ponds, so it breaks it up, so the waves weren't ever really big. But we just got pushed across all those ponds, so it was really nice to have that downwind situation. Then when we got to let's see where we get to. Lostons River, we kind of got confused a little bit. There's a bunch of markers missing right there, so you definitely want to have your GPS on for Lostons River area, so you don't end up going out the river. You end up going staying in the Everglades. So we did that. We went all the way to South Joe Bay. So coming into also the other tricky spots coming into Oyster Bay. Oh no, I'm sorry, I went to Broad River because Broad River campsite is a ground site, not the best for getting in and out. We got there at low tide, and so we had a bit of a hump to get up onto the ramp. It was probably 2 feet off the water, and it was very slippery because at high tide it's underwater, and so it was wet and muddy and slippery. We got the boards out there, and then we were waiting for the tide. We did fight the tide coming up the Broad River, but then we slept for 6 hours. And then we got the tide coming in. I guess we went downstream to get to Broad River, and then we stopped. Then we had we slept about 6 hours. Then the tide was coming in. We left Broad River about an hour and a half before high tide to do the Nightmare. Next year I would try to leave 3 hours before high tide to do the Nightmare, just so you get enough time that when you get through the Nightmare to the other side, and you're in the Harney River, you have the Harney River pushing you out, because that's where we had to go upstream, was all the way up the Harney River. And if you did that 3 hours before high tide, then you'd hit the Harney River just right. You get to the end of the Harney River, and then when you turn around and you start heading back out the Shark River, you'd be on the outgoing tide as well. So you'd be in sync with that. So that's important. Then once you come out the Shark River, you're going to get in Oyster Bay. And then we went from Oyster Bay all the way down to South Joe Bay, Chicky, spent the night there. That was pretty uneventful. The wind was blowing a little bit that day, but not as bad. That was on Wednesday, and supposedly out in the bay it was really bad. That's kind of why we did the Nightmare. Our original plan was to not do the Nightmare. We were just going to go take the shortest route. You can cut about 24 miles off by going out Lostons River, coming back in Shark River, but that would have put us crossing the bay on Wednesday, which they were predicting 30-mile-an-hour winds, and we didn't want to try to do a headwind of 30 miles an hour. And on Thursday it was supposed to drop down to 15, so that looked like a better idea. To go ahead and throw the Nightmare in, get the extra cool points in the Alligator Tooth, cross the bay on Thursday. So we ended up at Flamingo at 2 p.m. We left Flamingo, and it was about a 15-mile-an-hour headwind, and it was basically headwind all the way back to Key Largo. So instead of 9-hour crossing, it took us 15 hours, probably because we were tired as well. But basically, with all that wind, there was no water in the Everglades, so you had to stay in the channels for sure. There was no shortcutting. We tried one little shortcut and ran aground pretty quick, so I didn't want to have a repeat of last year, so we just stayed in the channels and finished up about 5:45 on Friday morning. The teams that didn't finish, I think they all had their issues, and I think the reason that we were able to be successful is because we were prepared, and both of us had done it before, so we had that to our advantage. But also, we spent a lot of time getting ready for we spent a lot of time getting ready for the race, and we got to paddle together, so I think that helped a lot as well. So what else worked? I guess talking to each other was really good, but also scheming together and bouncing ideas off each other was real helpful. And also, I kind of pictured having a football in the front of my board, and I was pushing that football down the field. So as long as the football was headed down the field, we were in good shape. Just when the football stopped moving, then we knew we needed to either take a break or we needed to figure something out. This is going to be one of those ongoing videos that we're going to put up on YouTube, so that everybody can, in the future, can use this information to hopefully increase their chances of completing this thing. It's definitely one of those things where you need to educate yourself as much as possible and try to get as much information in as you can. And if you can get a partner, but it can be doable on your own. You just need to be very determined and be very prepared.